Now it's just hell. It's hell.
They called him the Silent Assassin, a man who spoke softly but rode like the mountain owed him an apology. No trash talk or drama, just cold precision on the most punishing terrain in the world. For a sport built on chaos, where machines overheat and men break, this one rider made it all look like slow motion. That rider was Graham Jarvis. For nearly 40 years, he's been defying logic, physics, and the limits of pain. Where others chased glory, he chased control, and somehow, that's the thing that made him unstoppable. Born on April 21st, 1975 in the rolling countryside of Ripon, North Yorkshire, Jarvis didn't grow up with fame or sponsorships waiting for him. He grew up surrounded by farmland, silence, and enough open space to start trouble with a bike. That's where it started, in the backyard of his family home, with chickens at the bottom of the garden and a makeshift obstacle course built from whatever he could find.
No. And I used to have chickens at the bottom of the garden, and he used to ride down a garden path and jump straight up on top of the chicken house with his Monty bike, turn around and come back out again.
His parents tell stories that sound like the early chapters of a legend no one knew was being written. He'd ride up and down a narrow garden path, launching off whatever he could find. Anything that looked like a ramp became one. He wasn't chasing trophies, he was chasing balance, his obsession from the start. His father remembers him wearing out a brand new bicycle tire in a single week. The local bike shop owner couldn't believe it.
I got him a brand new tyre and he'd worn it out in a week. And I used to go down, is it Trev's cycles?
Yeah, Trev, yeah.
I used to go down there and I said, we've worn it out, Trev. No, I don't believe that, he said. I said, well.
He wasn't being reckless, he was teaching himself precision, experimenting with traction, learning how far the limit could stretch before it snapped. And that understanding of grip, balance, and instinct would later become his trademark. Before he was old enough to drive, Jarvis was already mastering the art of two-wheel control. He joined local youth trials events, where balance mattered more than speed. Trials riding demands something most riders hate: patience. It's about creeping over rocks, balancing on edges, controlling throttle and clutch with microscopic accuracy. One mistake, and you're done. Jarvis didn't just ride, he studied. Every obstacle became a puzzle. Every failed attempt is a clue. By his teens, people were starting to notice, not because he was loud or showy, but because he was good. So good that Roy Francis Motorcycles, a local shop, decided to sponsor him.
The only bike that I ever brought, and since then, he's been sponsored by Roy Francis in Paul Schmart's Motorcycles. And as I said, I went to try the little Honda 50, and Roy said, well, you can have them if he likes it, I'll sponsor him for the year. And Roy more or less sponsored him all the time after that.
And that was just because of some of the events that he'd been at, was it? It was some of the trial of it.
He saw him riding and he said he's going to be good in the future.
That was the first major turning point. It wasn't a full factory deal, but it was validation. Proof that this quiet kid could go somewhere if he stuck with it. He started climbing through the national ranks fast. He joined the Kent Youth Club, rode local and regional events, and by the time most kids his age were still figuring out homework, Graham was already riding against adults. And winning. Even back then, he wasn't about flash, he was about mastery, for being the rider who could keep his bike upright when everyone else was falling apart. That patience and control made him deadly in trials, and the results started piling up. He won his first British Trials Championship in 1998, then went on to win it 5 times in total. He also dominated some of the toughest events in sports history, the Scottish 6 Days Trial 4 times and the legendary Scott Trial 9 times. No one has ever beaten that record.
So it cost me a fortune in the end. And I can remember going to do the Scott Trial, and the first time we didn't know anything about the Scott and what have you. And I think Graham finished about 7th or 8th then. And I can remember standing behind Mark Lampkin and he was saying to somebody, and they said, how do you reckon Jarvis to do? And he said, he won't do very good here, he said. They go round the rocks here, he said, and we go over them.
Yeah.
But it proved him wrong in the end, because Graham actually, I don't know whether you know.
It's 4 times, wasn't he?
9.
He beat
Sammy Miller was the record holder, 8 times he won it. And Graham actually still holds it now. He's won it 9 times. Malcolm Rathmore won it 4 times.
By the late 90s, Jarvis was already a household name among trials fans. He had the respect of the paddock, a fan base that admired his technique and the quiet intensity that set him apart. But despite the trophies and the recognition, something was missing. Trials were technical and disciplined, but it wasn't madness. And Jarvis, he was starting to crave something wilder. The transition didn't happen overnight. At first, he just wanted to challenge himself in new ways. He entered a few Enduro races, long, punishing events that mixed terrain, weather, and exhaustion into one brutal test. It wasn't polished or predictable, and that's what hooked him. It wasn't just judges scoring precision anymore. It was survival and adapting in real time. Enduro wasn't about control, it was about mastering the madness. That shift would change his entire career. When Jarvis made the move from trials to Enduro in the early 2000s, most people doubted him. They thought his trials background wouldn't translate. They said he didn't have the speed, the aggression, or the physical size to keep up with the hardcore riders who dominated the discipline. They were wrong. He took everything he'd learned from trials, balance, traction control, throttle timing, and applied it to terrain that destroyed most riders. Suddenly, the impossible climbs didn't seem impossible anymore. Jarvis wasn't just competing, he was redefining how to ride hard enduro. In 2005, he made his full transition into the sport, and almost immediately, he started doing what he'd always done best: winning. He began stacking victories at events that chewed up even seasoned pros.
When you look back at your early days riding, did you ever imagine that hard enduro will grow into the sport that it is today?
My early days riding, there was no hard enduro. I've seen the sport from the very beginning. Yeah, the size of the sport, the number of riders, the bikes developing, crazy.
Erzberg Rodeo, Hell's Gate, Sea to Sky, and Red Bull Romaniacs. Romaniacs in particular became his arena. He won it 7 times, more than any rider in history. He didn't just win, he dominated with finesse that made the brutal Romanian mountains look like a playground. That's when the nickname stuck, the Silent Assassin. He wasn't loud, he didn't talk trash, he just showed up, destroyed everyone's expectations, and left quietly with another trophy. What made his story even more remarkable was how he did it. In his first Red Bull Romaniacs win, Jarvis showed up alone. No team, mechanics, or entourage, just him, his Sherco 254 stroke, and the will to survive. Every night after racing through some of the toughest trails on Earth, he'd go back to his setup, service his bike, and prepare it for the next day. He didn't complain, he just worked, and it paid off. He won the entire event. By 2022, he'd done it again, this time as a privateer, creating the Jarvis racing team and winning his 7th Romaniacs title, making history as the event's oldest champion.
What does Red Bull Romaniacs mean to you personally?
Just a lot of memories. Obviously 2008 was the first year. I've seen the event grow and a lot of memories, good and bad, but it's helped me make a name in enduro. It was one of the first races I won, so a lot to be grateful for.
What makes Jarvis' story stand out isn't just the titles, it's how he carried himself through all of it. A craftsman obsessed with the feel of the bike, the terrain, and the challenge. Even when the injuries came, and there were many, he refused to quit. Broken bones, torn ligaments, mechanical failures. He treated each one as just part of the game. You never saw him melt down or blame the bike. He just picked the bike up, restart, and carry on. That's where his legend grew. Not from dominance alone, but from composure under punishment.
Keep on top of the injuries. But the hardest thing is the recovery. You've just got to, as you get older, I think it's hard to do back-to-back days, to go flat out every day. You've got to rest up sometimes and plan the training a bit more.
Yeah.
Off the track though, Jarvis became something unexpected, a social media phenomenon. During lockdown, when most athletes went quiet, Jarvis turned his backyard into a training ground. He uploaded clips of himself hopping his bike over garden furniture, wheeling through tight spaces, and eventually, falling through his shed roof. The internet loved it. Overnight, he became the shed guy. Millions watched those clips, not just because they were funny, but because they showed a world champion having fun again. That's when the Garden Shed Killer nickname started circulating online.
That's Graham Jarvis. Now, I think it's fair to say, Graham, you're probably most famous for jumping your motorbike on a shed. Is that about right?
Yeah, that's the problem, isn't it? Forget winning races, I'm just the guy that fell through the shed.
So did he want to destroy that shed? Was that the plan?
Yeah, I was weighing it up. We'd done a few videos and you got to take it to the next level, haven't you? So I thought there might have been half a chance the shed would hold up, but I don't think it had much of a chance.
But behind the humor was a message. This guy loves riding, no matter where or when. By the time he hit 1 million followers on Instagram, Jarvis had done something few riders ever managed. He'd bridged the gap between hardcore fans and casual viewers. People who didn't even know what hard enduro was started following him because his riding was pure and his personality was real. He didn't chase trends, he just rode bikes. That down-to-earth nature became a big part of his appeal. Fans admired not just his dominance, but his humility. He spoke softly, laughed easily, and never acted like a celebrity. His career by then had spanned nearly 5 decades, and yet he was still competing with riders half his age, and often beating them. They called him the old man in the paddock, but no one laughed once the flag dropped. That combination of humility and competitiveness made him one of the most respected figures in all of motorcycling. The early 2000s changed everything for Graham Jarvis. He'd gone from trials champion to enduro hopeful, but the leap wasn't smooth. Enduro wasn't a sport that rewarded finesse alone. It punished weakness, fatigue, and hesitation. And in those first years, Jarvis learned how far toughness could stretch before it broke. He rode races that chewed through bikes and bodies. Injuries became routine. Even surgery couldn't keep him away for long. If he could grip the handlebars, he'd race. During one event, doctors told him he'd need months to heal, but he came back in weeks. For Jarvis, pain wasn't a barrier. It was just part of the ride. But it wasn't just his resilience that made people stop and stare. It was his calm. Where other riders fought the terrain, Jarvis seemed to read it. He'd stop, glance up the hill, and glide through sections that left everyone else stuck. It looked effortless, but it wasn't luck. It was decades of trials, instincts honed to perfection. His balance, throttle control, and vision changed how people rode hard enduro. You could see it in the next generation. Every rider who learned to Jarvis hop a boulder or thread a bike through rocks owed something to him. Each win came against stacked fields. Younger, hungrier riders who couldn't match his precision. He wasn't the fastest off the line, but he finished when others couldn't, and that was the difference. There's a famous clip from Erzberg, one of those climbs that looked impossible. Dozens of riders failed, one after another. Jarvis approached, paused for a second, adjusted his line, and floated over it like gravity forgot to apply. The crowd went silent. Then, they erupted. That was the moment fans realized they weren't just watching another racer. They were watching the best technical rider the sport had ever seen. Even as his fame grew, Jarvis stayed rooted in simplicity, but he also knew his career had to evolve. He couldn't ride forever, so he built something that would. He created Jarvis Racing, a team focused on helping young riders bridge the gap between amateur and factory levels, a step he never had when starting out.
Can beginners or mid-level riders also benefit from the Jarvis experience?
We cater for the higher level, professionals almost, but also beginners, amateurs, whatever level you're at, you can have a good experience.
He also launched Jarvis Signature Tours, riding schools and adventures in countries like Spain, Turkey, Wales, and Panama.
Or what inspired you to start the Jarvis Signature Tours?
Well, firstly in Spain, just sunshine, good riding, and I want to give people the opportunity to come here, ride whatever level they're at, learn some new skills.
The goal was simple: give riders a taste of real hard enduro and teach them the skills to survive it. He didn't just lend his name, he was out there riding with them. His tours became legendary, part coaching, part challenge, part adventure. Riders of every level showed up, hoping to learn from the man who'd conquered the unconquerable. Even as an instructor, Jarvis didn't change his tone. No motivational speeches, no cliches, just quiet advice, precise feedback, and demonstrations that made everything look easier than it was. He'd say little, ride a section, and leave students wondering how he made it look so simple. His philosophy stayed the same: ride smart, stay calm, let the bike do the work.
You're competing at the highest level. How do you translate that into guiding and into teaching?
Obviously some things I just do naturally, but take it back to basics, get the controls, the fundamentals, using suspension, and then progress from there, get the good steady progression.
Still, even legends face limits. Injuries began stacking up. Recovery took longer. He admitted that back-to-back racing days were harder, but instead of hiding it, he adapted. He trained smarter, ate cleaner, and adjusted his schedule. He talked about cutting down on red meat and junk food, training 3 or 4 times a week, and taking recovery seriously, something he'd ignored in his younger years. He wasn't chasing eternal youth. He was maintaining performance.
I was getting a little bit of a belly, so I had to change something. If you want good, I had to breathe in for all the photos. So, we had to change it. We had to change the diet a little bit before it got out of control. So yeah, I kind of eat a little bit less red meat and stuff, and more just try and stay healthy, stay off the desserts and the junk food. But the training, I've got to train hard, 3 or 4 times a week riding, and then I do a little bit of physical training.
That discipline kept him competitive well into his 40s. By this point, Jarvis wasn't racing for validation. He was racing to stay connected to the sport that built him. He joked that his career was running in reverse, starting with trials, then extreme enduro, maybe ending one day back on a trials bike. But for now, he was still the man to beat. He spoke about helping his younger riders reach the podium again, carrying the Jarvis name forward through them. He wanted to keep racing even when he wasn't winning, just for the thrill. That honesty resonated with the fans. The respect he earned in the paddock was universal. Competitors called him the professor, studying his every move.
When people come up to you and say they started riding because of you, how does that feel?
Yeah, it's just cool to think that I've been part of growing the sport. People just love the sport. They say it's changed their life just taking up the sport, because they meet, all the people are nice and they see different places in the world, and so it's pretty cool.
Newcomers asked for photos, advice, and sometimes a quick lesson on his technique. He never refused. And when the race was over, he was always last to the bar, a Yorkshire habit he liked to joke about. Graham Jarvis didn't just win races. He changed how people approached them. He turned a niche, brutal sport into a global spectacle, and did it without noise, arrogance, or theatrics. He became proof that mastery doesn't shout. It whispers, and everyone listens. Even after all the wins, Graham Jarvis never acted like a superstar. He never bragged about being the greatest. He just kept proving it. You could see it in his mindset. When asked about the future, he never talked about retirement. He talked about riding. As long as he could get on a bike, he said he'd keep racing. Even if he wasn't winning. It wasn't about trophies anymore. It was about the feeling. He often said that riding kept him alive. The focus, the challenge, it gave him purpose. Even as the sport evolved, Jarvis stayed relevant because his skill didn't depend on strength or speed. It depended on intelligence. Younger riders might be faster, but few were smarter. They studied his line choices, his calm under pressure, and his ability to find grip where no one else could. That was his gift, understanding terrain better than everyone else. In a world of noise, he mastered silence. His story wasn't just about victories, from riding through his garden as a kid to winning world titles alone in the mountains of Romania. The path was long, rough, and honest. Today, when fans watch highlights of Erzberg climbs or Romaniacs battles, they still look for him. The man in the gray helmet, eyes locked ahead, moving like the terrain doesn't scare him. That's Graham Jarvis, the best when it mattered most. Through Jarvis Racing, Jarvis Signature Tours, and his growing global community, his influence continues. He turned experience into opportunity, giving others what he never had at the start, and that's what defines him now. The rider who once raced alone in the hills of Romania now leads a generation of riders across the world. He's 50, still competing, teaching, and still smiling. He jokes about age, aches, and diet, but underneath it all, the drive hasn't changed. He rides because he loves it. That's the simplest truth about Graham Jarvis. No sponsors made him. No marketing built his name. He earned every title the hard way, with grit, patience, and the kind of quiet confidence that never fades. Graham Jarvis, the silent assassin, the man who made the impossible look routine. But what do you think? Is Jarvis the greatest technical rider of all time, or just the most disciplined? Drop your take in the comments below. Then keep the streak going. Watch our next deep dive on another legend who changed the game. Thanks for watching, and stay wicked.